As Jamie said, we are going to be looking specifically at access to work, at how you apply for that, the processes, and trying to break that down a little bit. It's a really useful fund to apply for, but it can take time and it can seem quite complicated. So this is about breaking it down. I've also got a guide which gives you all this information in it. So you don't have to take lots of notes. The slides are available, but also I will be able to share with you that guide. I think, Jamie, we set that up before.
Yeah, I'll...
For today's session, we are going to have a quick look. We can do a little bit of introduction. I'll do that really quickly because Jamie's already introduced me. We've had a part of that. Going into a little bit more about what access to work is. Identifying what your needs are, because although access to work provides a function to support you to tease out some of those things, you are asked about it in the application form. I'm going to go through the eligibility and bits of the questions that you might encounter during that process. And then once it's out there, which is the bit that Darren's in at the moment, in that really long phase where he's just waiting and it's getting pushed back. After that, what happens after that? What happens if you don't get the result that you were hoping out of it? And how you can make that work and communicate with the case managers at Access to Work. Hopefully, that will give you a starting point if you haven't applied and are interested in doing that. So to be able to see what it might do for you or what it might do for other people as well who you work with, because sometimes you can share the information and get these messages out to other people. Who is this Anj woman? So Jamie has introduced me a little bit. I have a background in charity leadership. So I did that for many years before my ADHD diagnosis, which was early 2023, when I took a step back to really think about what I wanted to do with my life for the remainder of my working life. Who knows how long that's going to be, and just to think about what might be different based on my experiences of my diagnosis, of how I was supported with coaching to process everything that I was going through, because it's a big change in how we think about ourselves and how to do that in a positive way, as well. So I am now, and have been for over a year, an ADHD coach. I also train organizations and talk about that, what the things that we need in the workplace to thrive. So that's not just ADHDers, that's anyone. How do you really make inclusion work? And asking kind of quite probing questions, but also sharing information with people that they might not know. Jamie and I were talking earlier about the fact that so much that we didn't know before, and we've all been on this big learning curve, and then sometimes we get a bit surprised that everybody else isn't in the same place as us, but they haven't had the same kind of push to do this. I've written some books. So I'm a recovering charity CEO and I love to speak. So give me a microphone and I'm a very happy woman. It's just how it is. My pronouns are she, her. I, as well as all of these things, I do lots of other things. I like to describe myself as wearing many of the sparkly, shiny hats. So, and what I've really gained in the last few years and through coaching, and I got some of my first coaching through Access to Work, is exploring and finding ways to navigate a neurotypical world and neurotypical workplaces with a brain that thinks about and wants to do things in a different way, and discovering what works best for me and how I can share that with other people and use those strengths. So I managed to get my sparkle back. I still have days where I'm a bit like, but not every day. So that's just a very quick summary into me. So most important thing we're all here to have a look at. So what is Access to Work? We've got some different views, but what would be really great is if you could pop in the chat a few words, few sentences about what you think Access to Work is. And the reason I'm asking this is because I go back to when I was being a charity CEO and I thought I knew what Access to Work was. But when it came down to it, and when I found out more about it, it turns out I only had a tiny snippet of that. I didn't really know the extent of what it did. No. So I can see lots of typing happening. Darren, funds available for all to keep them work either now or in the future. Jamie, it helps people manage the workplace. Lyndon, I don't really know what it does. That's why I'm here. Brilliant. All of these are really helpful. And there's no right or wrong in any of this as well. I love watching the little dots go. It's like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Can be a little bit hypnotic. So everything that's been said so far is true. Same, David, the same as for Lyndon. And I've just got some names. So yes, it's about helping people to manage in the workplace. Okay, Paul, I thought it was just general advice about job applications rather than being a definite entity. Okay, so that's really interesting because that's kind of sort of where I was before. I was in this space where I thought it was about getting a job and getting into work. But actually, it's more of a situation where people are in work and helping you to remain in work. Thank you, Georgia. Georgia's like sharing that she's a mother of an 18-year-old with ADHD and a wife of a 50-year-old with ADHD. So there's a lot of learning here. Great, wonderful. And government scheme to provide financial support for those with disability to enable them in the workplace. And what this is all about is creating a level playing field. This is about equity. This is about getting us into the place where workplaces support us as well. Okay, so all of those things really helpful. A UK government scheme, and you can see there's a little star there, and we'll come to that in a second, which supports individuals with disabilities or health conditions. So mental health comes into this as well. You may have something which impedes you in work, but may not be classed as a disability. You might not have a badge that says, I have a disability. It's about how it affects you at work. And the fund is to provide adjustments and tools and support so that you can be on a par with your colleagues. That level playing field. And that really great thing is you don't need to have a diagnosis to apply for this. It's not something where you will be asked about how you're affected at work, but it's not something where you have to provide reams of things from a doctor or anything like this. This is about setting up you with what you need to be able to be the best you at work, that you know, and really engage in it and enjoy work. All of those. Also to say that if you have just got a new job and you're about to start work, that 4 weeks on the run up to you starting, if you apply during that period, in theory, you should be fast tracked because they want to get people early in that situation and give you the support. How that sits with all of the backlog that they've got at the moment, I'm genuinely not sure. But if you are in that position, or if you're managing someone who is about to start a job and would benefit from the support and is happy to apply, encouraging and supporting them to do that is could be a really helpful thing. So who's it for? That's kind of what it is. It's a very snapshot moment, but who can apply? Okay. Anybody. This is all about paid work. So if you're volunteering, it doesn't count. But anyone who's in paid work, if you're an employee, if you're self-employed, if you're running a company, if you are an apprentice, or if you're a paid intern, any of those things means that you can apply. As I say, it doesn't apply to volunteers. You don't need a diagnosis. And realistically speaking, the number of people with ADHD who also have another coexisting condition autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, or a mental health condition, often quite high. So you can talk about those within that as well. It's not just about one thing that's affecting you. That little star from earlier was just to say that Northern Ireland isn't included in this. So England, Wales and Scotland, if you live in one of those areas and you are getting money for your work, then you can apply. The other thing is, if you work for the civil service, then there is a different scheme. So access to work isn't your way in. The civil service have a similar scheme to support people who they employ. So that kind of takes that out. And I would imagine that's quicker because you're already in there and it's built up. Right.
So the civil service, they don't accept access to work claimants?
No, they don't, just because they've got their own kind of in-house scheme.
So what's like job centre? What about NHS? Are they civil service?
I think NHS is not counted in that. Sorry, I will need to go back and double check that. But certainly, if you work for DWP, I don't know about the job centre. It depends what you're classed. So it could be, and maybe that's something for you to have a little bit of investigation.
Absolutely will. I'll write that down now.
Yeah, because in terms of civil, I'm pretty sure that NHS is separate, but yeah.
Okay, no, I'm never sure whether NHS is technically civil service or not. It's the line is blurry.
Yes, as often lines are, which isn't necessarily that helpful for us. So Lyndon's asking, does having a diagnosis help bump you up the list? Unfortunately not. It's the logic of access to work is sometimes a little bit bewildering as to what gets you.
I was going to ask, what's the level of objectivity versus subjectivity with these things when you sort of means tested?
It's okay. So one, this isn't a means tested pot of money. It's almost about like how you're affected in the workplace. So you can earn. There's a kind of a level that you have to be. You have to be on minimum wage, but beyond that, you could earn loads. It doesn't take your income above that into account. It doesn't take your savings into account, which means actually it's more accessible for a lot of people than it might be if you've got to go through the process of showing how much you earn, etc. And to be honest, I don't know. I've never worked with anybody who's on a massively huge income who's got funding out from access to work, because I think people have different means of getting the support that they need. That's just a feeling. That's just my sense of things.
Apologies, it's my bad. I probably misused the phrase means test. I meant sort of means test in terms of and there's a second there's an underlying point behind this, because obviously we hear a lot about government cuts and all the rest of it at the moment. So that's the kind of thing I'm worried about. And then you think, they're going to be people who are kind of like, filling in the form deliberately saying, oh yes, I'm really struggling with that and really struggling with that, just so that they get something for free, or they get something, as opposed to people like us who actually need help.
I can see that happening.
There might be. So in my experience, it's hard enough to navigate the system, but it would if you want to scam something, it's not an easy quick win scam.
Yeah. Okay.
A, the queues are really long. B, it's okay. It depends. This is a scheme which has a lot of value, helps a lot of people, but it relies on you being able to put your case forward. Now, having said that, there are organisations who will support you to put your application through. I've worked with some people as well. So it's hard. And it is harder now than it was. When I first started, when I first put my first claim in, it was a 3-month turnaround. So compare that to what Darren's saying, that's a huge difference. And my first claim went in February 23. That it's not a big time scale. it's about pressure, it's about money in the government, and their ability to be able to serve all of the people who are now on that list. So unfortunately, like, having a diagnosis doesn't seem to, doesn't add anything to that. And we're also sort of talking about, lots of neurodivergent people in there, and lots of other disabilities, physical and mental health conditions as well. So there's a lot of a mix there. And Jamie, it is similar to the situation where, saying people might want to fake their ADHD, pretend they've got ADHD, get a diagnosis so they can get stimulant meds. If it was that,
Wow, is that a thing? Wow.
No,
Well,
it isn't a thing. That's
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm just referring to how when people say, like, oh, some people might fake an ADHD diagnosis to get the stimulants, but like it's so difficult to get the ADHD diagnosis. And I mean, I'm not an expert, but I imagine it's probably easier to get street stimulants than it is to get ADHD medication. Is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, more than likely, it's just one of those kind of blanket myths that gets popped out there for people. So yes, access to work is not a perfect thing. It's not a perfect process to go through. It can be frustrating, but actually, it can help you to get funding that and the support that you might not be able to get otherwise. So what I say to everybody is, if in doubt, apply. Think about, and we're going to go a little bit through that application and see the sorts of things that you might cover, and you might be asked during that process. So you've got a bit of an understanding as to whether this is for you or not, and how you might want to approach it, and whether you might need support for that. So what are the kind of supports you can have? So there is a practical support, and there is equipment. And then, as you can see on the slide, it says support to manage your mental health at work. That is a side of things that they farm out to a couple of other organisations whose name have escaped me right now. My ADHD is very much showing up there. But what they do is just to give you typically about 6 sessions of often CBT focused work with you. They, in theory, are informed. I've had one set which was great. I've had people who have had different experiences too. So that varies. When you're filling in the form, you can tick a box which asks about able futures. Thank you, Darren. Yeah, and there's another one as well. And I've dealt with both of them in different forms, formats, which is why I get them confused in my head. So the big bulk of access to work, though, is around the not that mental health support, the other stuff. So things that you might get is, if you are starting a new job, they might grant you a support worker to help you with that process. They often support coaching, but mostly in the first application that you make. So you've gone through that process, you've had the conversations and the assessment, and they might award 12 sessions of coaching at a certain rate. But what they don't then at the end of it go, when your grant comes to the end of the year and you're trying to renew it, it's very rare for them to say, yes, you can have more coaching because you've done that part. So it's seen as sort of standalone. Equipment is something that you can ask for or might be suggested. So some of these things are becoming a bit normal now. So speech to text software is built into a lot of our apps, etc. now, but there is specialist things that they can award. They can do things like a stand-sit desk. It depends on what you need. There are some really easy things like noise cancelling headphones if you're in a busy office, if you're not in a place where your employer can provide that. ADHD awareness training, disability, neurodiversity training is an awareness around that, is something that they provide for people, for their colleagues, so that you're not the person having to explain everything to your colleagues. That's delivered online. I deliver some of that as
great.
well.
So
Lyndon,
what
access to work is talking about things beyond that, beyond normal things that we know that we've now got that can help us in the workplace. So extra things. So a bit like I was saying, that speech to text software it's still relevant for some people, but actually for a lot of people, we've got what we need there. But there are other things. So there are still subscriptions to apps where they have to be paid for. There are things they'll pay for support workers. So I've got virtual assistants on the slides. They're becoming really a bit tighter about this, but if you need someone who will be able to specifically help you with your day-to-day stuff that your ADHD or a different condition makes it really hard for you to do, to be working on the same level as your colleagues, then they will award you some hours for a support worker. Come on to that a little bit, but one of the things about this is they are getting tighter with it. If your employee can provide that, if that's something that's part of that, then they may ask your employee to provide it or to add a contribution to that. Now, if you're working for a company that's less than 250 people, that tends to get waived. But otherwise, there's often asked for a contribution from your employer. And you do need to tell your employer, unless you're self-employed, then you can just tell yourself. But if you are employed, then you will need to tell your employer, but not at this stage. So when you put your application in, you have to, your employer isn't going to get a thing flagging up saying, Darren's applied. But the reason that your employer needs to be involved is that often the money goes via them. So the money will go to the awards yours, but the money will go to them. And that means that they have to do some of the logistics of sorting things out. And that can take that away from you. If you're self-employed, you normally claim your grant yourself. If you're employed, your workplace can do that for you, and they can do invoicing and things like that too, which is kind of nice. As a self-employed person, me and my support worker do that. So yeah. I have.
Sorry, just back to the original question about the what if you're not.
Yes.
A lot of those were digital based. So
yes.
What help does it offer for non-digital workers?
Yeah, so it depends on you and your circumstances. It can be, so a lot of people still have diary requirements like workloads, managing your workload, how you do that, emotional regulation support, equipment might be needed, but you might not be massively digital, but you might still be working in an office. So as I say, equipment, good chairs. And if you don't know what you need, when we come to the questions, you'll see this, but there are options. So it's like, do you know what you need? Yes, no, I don't know. If you click I don't know at this stage in the game, it's not a problem. In fact, that means it just leaves everything really open. So when you get to the top of the list and you're having a conversation about what will help you in the workplace, you can actually say, I don't know. It's more than likely that you will be then asked to do a workplace needs assessment, which is the one that are done by other organizations, which will help you to talk through what you're struggling with, and they can make recommendations about what will help you. So it's not all down to you to do everything when you're filling out this form. If you're unsure, clicking the don't know button is absolutely fine. There are so many things, we're all different and we all need different things. So it's going to vary from person to person, but just having a think about your needs at the stage if you're doing an application is useful. And if you've got a long way, you might have things that pop up and you can just make them down as you go, because you will be asked about it a little bit more when you get to that top of the queue. Now, so just to give you a bit of an idea of the process. So as I say, what happens after you do that application? So you can apply. Most people apply online, but you can apply by telephone by phoning the Access to Work helpline. Having a list of questions and having thought through what your answers were there is helpful, because I don't know about you, but people sending me lots of questions off the top of my head can be, I don't always pull out the information I want at the time. So being able to just think that through is great. Or you can do it online, gives you a bit more time. With the online application, what I would say is you have to do it in one session. Otherwise, it times out. It doesn't save. So think about giving yourself some time, unless they've changed it recently, but giving yourself some time to prepare. And what I will share with you all is the list of the questions, the things that you'll be asked, so that you can jot down some notes, and you can do it on paper, you can do it on a file, so you've got a copy somewhere else as well, not just that online form that you're sending off. And then if the worst comes to the worst and you get half through and something crashes, you've still got it there. You haven't lost all of that thinking or work that you were doing while you were sitting online. When you get to the top, the magic top of the end of the queue, you're assigned a case manager, and you will have an initial call with them. And at that time, they tend to contact you out of the blue. It's Jamie, sorry, did you have something to say there?
No, just Jess, they contact you out of the blue, they wait till you're on the train or something like that. In the middle of like on holiday, in the middle, like on a train in front of everybody.
Exactly what happened with me. I was on a train. What you do in that situation is say, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. Can we arrange it? Can you email me to arrange a time to talk?
Oh, really? I just thought that I thought that I had to like have the conversation. It was the most awkward thing that I'd ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe but it was. Yeah. I didn't like it.
You're on a train, it's lots of pressure, you weren't expecting the call, you're trying to like recall all the information, think about what you've put in your application as well, so you can completely say that. In fact, now I'm on my third grant now, but my third year of a grant, and what I have noted on my file now is that I want to be communicated with only by email, because getting to the point where I'm picking up random calls and saying, they always ask for your security details, so like to prove who you are. So someone phones you up and asks you to prove who you are, and asks you questions like, what's your national insurance number, and like, where did you live 6 years ago, and things that we don't always have on the brain. And my top tip for that one is to create yourself a file with that information. You can have it password protected, have it on notes or wherever you keep that sort of information on your phone that's really easy to access, so you can just dip into that to answer those questions. Initially, talking to a person can be really useful to just get a bit of a gist of who they are. And case managers, typically, some of them know about the different things that we're experiencing, others don't. So there is some kind of explaining things, and they are acting on what they're told to do. So sometimes it can feel quite stringent and quite like, well, why are you asking it me that way? But they are, you know, as other people who are employed, they're being told to do things a certain way and ask things a certain way to try to get a bit of standardization, which at the moment isn't really working across the country. So honestly, there can still be a bit of a postcode lottery when it comes to who you get. Just thinking about what you want to say and having that to hold and being able to communicate in a way that's best for you. And for many of us, that isn't about like a random phone call. So do say that if it's not the right time for you, do say when you're available and at a time that's going to be as the least stressful for you. I prefer early mornings. I prefer to have a call then. I like to have a slot so I know, and I can put it in my diary and remember that's going to happen when. No. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about workplace assessments. You might be asked to do one of those, and then you get through to the process where your case manager will inform you about decision that's been made. You get your assessment detail, your workplace assessment details, and they're used to make that decision from them. You will be informed by email normally, sometimes by phone, about the outcome of that. And then you get a letter to confirm that, get that official letter comes to you during that point. Okay, so just show you a little bit about what these forms look like if you're doing it online. You've got to set up an account. So if you're doing this for the first time, it's going to ask you to set up an account. Now, what it doesn't say on here is that process is changing slightly. So they are going to be asking people to sign up using their government ID. So some of you may have signed up for other things with government ID on gov.gov.uk. And what they're trying to do is just streamline everything so that you don't have lots of different logins for everything. But it will start off by asking, some basic information about you. There are different sections. So eligibility, your details, your basic things like where you live, what your name is, your telephone number and your contact preferences. So you can say prefer to be contacted by email, or I would like to be contacted just by phone if that's your preference as well. It asks you about your disability and conditions, questions about your work situation, and then questions, as I was talking about before, as in what might help you. And then the ending bit is just your kind of standard declaration. Everything I've put in here is true. I'm not making any of this up. So that bit's fairly straightforward. And we often have that information in our heads. If not, just maybe noting them down before. So looking at it here, who should we contact about your application? Now, this is quite a key question because you don't necessarily have to be the person who talks to Access to Work. Someone can submit, you're submitting this, or someone can do that on your behalf. So if you are being supported by another organisation who is advocating for you, you can put their details in. And then those phone calls will go to them and not to you. And there are, I support people, there are other organisations out there who will support people too with this process. So if you feel that it's something that you value extra support, then that support is out there. You might be someone who just much prefers to do this on your own without another kind of pair of ears. And that's a very personal thing. So, but this is something you can put in at this stage and let someone to be your proxy, essentially, in this situation. And then it's about you. Really focusing in on what your conditions are, what your disabilities are, how your mental health is, and essentially what are the things that affect your ability to do your job. So if it's not affecting your ability to do your job, that's probably the point where you wouldn't bother with the application. But if you are struggling with someone, and the example I've given here is something that very much affects me as well, I really massively struggle with estimating how long it takes to do something.
Yeah.
I will go, no problem. I can do that. It's just going to take me, it'll take me half an hour. I know that this is a problem for me, so I build in more time and things. But when I don't, it means that I've got competing demands. I don't get things done. They've had that funding through Access to Work. It's often the employer that I am invoicing rather than that person. It goes to them. They pay for me, and then they claim back at that point. So, as I say, they won't contact them without your permission. You're at that point. Once you get to that top of the queue, you can have those conversations. If you're employed, though, at some point and they offer you a grant, you're going to have to, that's a shared thing that has to happen. Okay, if you're self-employed, really similar questions on there. There is a minimum income ceiling on this. It's relatively low. But if you are just a startup and you're working for yourself, there's a couple of years grace time to allow you to get to that point. So there's not an expectation that you've just started a business and you're going to be a millionaire or actually even being solvent. So they get that and they know that that's difficult. As I said, that wait is there's a longer wait now to get to the top of the queue if you're self-employed generally. But it is still worth applying for because our needs don't disappear overnight. It might make it harder in that earlier process, but yeah. Okay, so you'll then be asked about what you need, what helps. Do you need specialist equipment? So that might be things like software. That could be things like desks. It could be, depending on what you do, what do you need? And this is sort of in there because, more widely, because some people need support with travel. Some people need support with, in terms of equipment, might need like specialist software that isn't included at work. It might need chairs. It might need things that you can, mobility side of things too. Again, it says, do you know what you need? If you're not sure, put I don't know. Perfectly fine. This isn't going to like move you out of the queue or anything like that. If you do know what you need, you can pop things down. So on the slide, there are some examples of software that people find useful. I have here my, I've got my it's kind of like, it's a bit messy. This is my Remarkable. It's an e-ink notepad. So instead of using paper notepads, which I traditionally have thousands of and would lose or write for the first few pages and then need a new one, everything sits on here. It backs up to my computer and it feels like writing, like just normally on paper. I didn't get that through Access to Work, but like they do award things like that through Access to Work. And then things like I've got on there Sunsama. Sunsama's a brilliant program which helps you plan your day. And we've all got those. That's the friendliest, kindest one I've met yet. Body doubling, Focus Mate gives you a body doubling function so that if you magically, and I would think this works quite magically, so being able to sit on a call with someone else, they're doing work, say what you're doing at the beginning and at the end, you just say how you've got on. There's something that helps to be doing something along with someone else. So there are lots of different aspects of that in there. And then the next section is about support workers. So we've talked about that again. And we're in there. So they will fund things like virtual assistants, job coaches, interpreters, if you are deaf, and then coaching, ADHD coaching comes into that as well. So that's just a small sample of those things. I know some people who've got 12 hours support. I've got 4 hours support a week. That's invaluable to me in managing my time and that time estimation. But at this point, you can say, yes, no, I don't know. And I often say, if you put don't know, it's kind of, you're not pinned down to what you've written on the form. Because if you're really clear and you've been waiting for a really long time and you get to the end of that, your needs might have changed. If you've got to wait a year, 6 months, what you need now when you get to the top of the queue might be different to what you thought you needed at the time. And everything changes. You are allowed to talk about that, but it's just, if you're not sure, press I don't know. And then the same with what type of support worker do you need? For some people, that's about someone who will do aspects of their job that they find really like their condition prevents them from doing, or it takes them a very long time. But some people, that's about accountability and having someone who's checking in and helping them organize their day, their week. So helping with that prioritization, if that's something that's really difficult for you, and kind of keeping you on track and asking you questions like, well, if you do all that, like, how long is that going to take you? And how much energy is that going to take from you, etc. So really, those are just a couple of examples of how someone might work to support you in your role to be able to do that, because your brain is working differently. And yes, we are nearly at the end of the form. And would you benefit from physical changes to your workplace? This tends to be often around people who have a physical disability, that change is needed for them. But it might be that you're in a really busy office and it's crowded and noisy, and what you need is a quiet space in the corner. You might work best sitting by a window. Putting those things in is fine, because what can happen is that when you go through this process, Access to Work might recommend that an employer just does that. They might say that's just a reasonable adjustment that they would expect an employer to make, but then someone else has said that that's not you. So I would always include things like that if they feel relevant to you. And then they've got one of these magic any other information. So this is the place for you to say the things that you want to say. If there's something you're dying to say that there hasn't been space on the form to say, you can do that. You might not want to say anything else at this stage. And then you click submit, you apply, your application goes online, or if you've done it over the phone, they take that down, and then you wait. You're in that little waiting game, like Darren, wondering when that will be. It is worth, if you've kind of been given an indication of how long it's going to be and there's an expectation, it is worth phoning up the helpline. You're sometimes on hold for a while there to just check what's going on, so that you're still engaging with the system, and also just from the point of view that you're not like sitting without that knowledge. You have a little bit of control in the situation if you've got an update on that timescale, even if it's not ideal. Talked a little bit about workplace assessments. They tend to happen virtually, but it might be that you're in a kind of a workspace or a workplace where it's more like they need to physically come out and do that face-to-face. I don't know anyone recently who's had a face-to-face one, to be honest. I think that's the world has sort of changed a bit more. I've had one of those. I asked questions. I thought, said about what I thought would help me. The person is separate from who's doing this, is separate from Access to Work, so can then think about anything else that you might not have included. Thanks Darren for adding that. It's just if you use a mobile, you'll receive a reference number via SMS. I think that might be a new thing, because that didn't happen for me. But yeah, no, that's great to know. Thank you, because things are evolving and changing as we go. I definitely had an email things going, this is gone, this is where you are now. So yeah. And then you get to the stage where you've had that workplace assessment. As I say, it goes back to your case manager. They make a decision about what you might need, what they think and what their recommendations are. Ideally, they will either phone you or send you an email to tell you what that is, and then you get a letter in the post. Having said that, I had to chase them because I got my update. I had to renew my grant, and I got my decision, and that was about 6 weeks ago, and still haven't had my letter. So that yes/no situation. So now, this is quite important. So if you're not happy, if you don't feel that you have been what you have said has been portrayed correctly, it's been shared correctly, it's been considered correctly, you can request a reconsideration. And I have done that. Last year I did that because it was kind of like, you don't need that. And I'm like, there are words in this letter that don't reflect what I said, and this has not been taken into consideration. That's not been consideration. That was successful. Just the facts. So keeping a kind of a record of what's been said as it goes along can be useful, just in case. At the moment, I would say about reconsiderations, they're also taking quite a long time to process. They're taking about 34, 35 weeks at the last thing I saw. So, but if you haven't been offered what you need, what will support you, then there's not really a negative in doing that reconsideration. It just means that someone else will look at your case. And I know a lot of people who do this, and they're upheld at that point. So it feels like it's just another stage that some people need to go through. Darren, thank you. He's gone, but yeah, thank you, Darren. So you can absolutely do that. So this is a whistle stop tour. of all of that. There is more information in my guide, which you'll get a hold of, and I'm always happy to answer questions about this. This is something that it's not something I charge people for, because I think it should be like support for this kind of application should be available to everyone. So